I really hesitated to do that song, to put that song in here. Yeah, I always think about that. Of course, I love that song. I thought that was great. And then after I hear the band do that song, I thought, it's kind of timeless. And then I thought, well, no, it is kind of time-bound. That song's about 30 years old. 40 years old. Thank you for reminding me of that, yeah. But here's the thing, and it's my imagination, and I'm sorry, I got this weird imagination, but sometimes I hear these songs, and I realize, Jesus came at a time, he came into a world and spoke in the context of the world. He spoke in the context of the people he encountered in the world. And the odd thing is that the religious authorities, in terms of the Jewish tradition out of which he came, kind of didn't like him because he was talking to everybody, and he was speaking in everybody's context and not just his own. And it occurred to me that that's what we do here, right? That's part of what we do this is our training ground for realizing that God is present in all things, that God is present in all of our lives. It's present in our longings. God is present in our longings as much as God is present in those answers. In fact, I suspect God is more present in the longings than even the answers as we continue to evolve and as we continue to grow, not just in our world, but in our faith and our spirituality. And as many of us have come out of these traditions of naysaying experiences, of no, of denying, of rejection, of being excluded, much as many of the people around Jesus were, as we come into that reality, we realize that sometimes, and this is going to be interesting to say this, sometimes we have to let go of God in order to find God. Sometimes we have to step away in order to see more clearly. I think a lot of us in here know exactly what I'm talking about. That's what Epiphany really is about too. It's not a one-time moment. It's not just that one time that Jesus came out of, was born into the world and incarnate, God incarnate, holiness, divinity, present in the world. It's not just that. It's this message that says God is the ground of being. God is revealed in life. Do you have the eyes to see it? That's really what Epiphany is about. That's why it's such an interesting time. The horn players are down, and I was going to ask them to stick around, but that's okay. They can come back up in a minute to do their thing. I didn't bring these horns this morning, but my family and I have a tradition. There's a lot of traditions around this particular time of the year in the Eastern Orthodox Church and in some Western churches and in some Catholic churches. There's these various traditions of Epiphany, of Twelfth Night, the 12 days of Christmas, 12th night falling on Epiphany, which was technically yesterday. And then there's Candlemas, which is the February the 2nd, which is not right before Ash Wednesday, kind of almost a couple of weeks before. There's all these different traditions. So if you still have your lights up and you're feeling a little lazy, you can go all the way till February 2nd, technically. It's still a holy season, technically, so. But we had this tradition. It started early on when my kids were young, when my boys were young, and we decided we were going to celebrate Epiphany as much as we did Christmas. We didn't get into the 12 days of Christmas thing so much. I kind of randomly gave a little something each day of the 12 days of Christmas. But on the 12th day, on Epiphany, we celebrated with a big party. And a lot of traditions do the thing where they have the king's cake, and you have the baby buried in the king's cake. I don't know if any of you, if you grew up Catholic, you might have done this tradition. And the one who finds the baby, I've never asked a Catholic person, what do you do if you find the baby? What does that mean you get? Is it like the tooth fairy? You get $1? I don't know. Oh, that doesn't seem like a gift at all. That doesn't seem like a prize at all. So in our tradition, what we did was we decided that we would have whoever got the baby was king for the evening, for the rest of the evening, right? Or queen. They were the royalty for the rest of the evening, and they got to decide what we would do. And sometimes most of the kids that were involved were always boys. I think once Lynn, once your kids came and were part of that too, so we had a couple of girls that night. But most of the time it's been guys, and usually that they've wanted, and it's always been things like, well, we're going to watch It's a Wonderful Life over again. Or one night Tim won it one year, and we watched Home Alone and had popcorn at the house and stuff, and just had a fun time. Well, Matthew won it one year, and that started this tradition. Matthew, our youngest, won it, and he said, what we're going to do is we're going to take Dad's Tibetan horns, which are these 8-foot extended horns that the Tibetan Buddhists use, and I just happen to have some. And you people don't. I have about 4 of them. They're awesome. So they are various sizes, 5 to 9 feet. And so they're really hard to play. But when you blow them, they make these really deep, low, offensive kinds of loud sounds. And then you have smaller ones, which make higher pitched sounds, kind of like the trumpet. And so my son said, what we're going to do is we're going to get in the back of Dad's minivan, because that's what I had, was a minivan back at the time. And so it had also a 15-inch woofer, subwoofer, but that was to coolify it. But so he says, we're going to drive around town, lift up the back end, and all the boys are going to sit in the back with the Tibetan horns, and we're going to blow the horns around the neighborhood as we travel around the neighborhood and shout, Happy Epiphany. And then we're going to go to McDonald's for a bucket of fries. And so that started our tradition of Epiphany, which we've done to some degree for the last 25 years. In fact, this last year was the last time that we really didn't do it, because the guys were elsewhere and the other families were elsewhere. It's the first year we really hadn't gathered as a family, and something's kind of missing. So maybe we'll do that at the end. The horns will just start playing and we'll all start shouting. Now, you need to do it outside. Yeah, you need to do it outside. We did drive through town, and of course, 2/3 of the people had no idea what we were talking about. And it's just a random January day, and they're screaming happy Epiphany. But there's this idea with Epiphany that really is important, and it's this idea that God is revealed. The story goes, and it is a beautiful story, the story goes in one of the Gospels, it's only in one, that the Magi, these are scientists of the day, astronomers of the day, the Magi go and they find Jesus. They're looking for the star because the star has been revealed to them that they're going to find the king, and they want to come in and pay respects to the king, and so these wise men are seeking him. And when they find him, that's the idea, they find God revealed. They suddenly realize they found something much bigger than themselves, much bigger than they expected, and they go about not going to go to Herod, who's typical antithesis, the typical power struggle with that which is good, always is struggled against. Those who have control always want to destroy that, destroy love, destroy what's good in the world, and so they go a different way. That's the story. Epiphany, however, means something else. Epiphany means revealed. But what's revealed? What's revealed is God in the world. Love, the ground of being, as the Apostle Paul called it. So this season is an important season. So we were playing around with this idea of Epiphany. It's important for a couple of reasons, and it's important to me personally because it's also the day on which I asked my wife to marry me. And because of the same reason. So yesterday we're celebrating, right? And so we're celebrating at Cafe Press, and we're sitting on the side of the trail and enjoying it. And I look at my wife, and this was yesterday, Epiphany, and I said, "So today was the day, right? And that's why we're here." And she said, "No, Tom, it was yesterday. It was January 5th." I said, "No, it was the 6th." And she said, "No, it was the 5th, I know. It was on Lake Whitney." I said, "Linda, the whole reason it was Epiphany is because I chose this day, because God revealed love to me through you. I truly experienced this depth and beauty of love, and that's why I wanted to marry you." And she just kind of looked at me for a while, and about 2 minutes later she says, "You know what, I think you're right. I think it was on Epiphany." You know... It's a beautiful story, isn't it? There's this point of Epiphany which is about God saying yes to life, about God saying yes to the world, in a world that was mostly about no, mostly about control, mostly about oppressiveness. Not a different world from today too much. Sure, the technology, modernity, all of that stuff, we're a different culture, perhaps, but still the same human dilemmas. We're still struggling with power struggles. We're still struggling with fake news. We're still struggling with inauthenticity. We're still struggling with this reality in which we don't feel deeply connected like we could. But that's the message of Epiphany. That's the message that is given. It's this message of yes to the moment. Yes. Okay, it didn't happen. They'd have Brad. Where are you, Brad? Yet? That's all right. That's okay. Yes. Thank you. It feels good, doesn't it? Yes. Just say it. Yes. Yes. Now I know some of you are going like, "No." That's okay. I understand that. It's hard. I understand that. Improvisation, the whole point of improvisation, of teaching people to say yes to the moment, is because it's realizing that this moment is gift. And how do we respond to this moment? We respond to it somehow by giving back, right? Life is gift. How do we respond to life? Well, Jesus certainly showed how we respond to life. By giving back, by connecting, by reaching out, by including. The message of the gospel has always been about not me, but us. Not me, but the salvation of the world. The kingdom of God. Our text this morning, the wonderful thing that I love about John's gospel, keep in mind John's gospel was written 40 years, 30 years after the last gospel. So it was written around 110, 115 AD, whereas the rest of them were written between 70 and 80. 85. So it's a whole different focus. The fall of the temple has already happened. The temple in Jerusalem has already fallen under Roman rule. There's this sense of impending doom and confusion and chaos. And into that, John writes his gospel. It's a different understanding. Things didn't quite happen the way we thought they would happen. But now we understand exactly what Jesus is about. The kingdom is already here. It has already come. We are already called to participate in transforming the world. How do we do that? Well, so that's what I want to focus on, is this series for the next 6 weeks of Epiphany, of living intentionally into God's revelation in the world, living intentionally into the ground of our being. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about 6 different practices, but this first one is yes. And by that, what I mean is intentionally letting go of negation. That's a little challenging. Like I said, saying no is so much easier. It's the first thing we learn how to say as infants, right? It's one of the first things do we ever hear infants just, 5, 6 months old go, yes? You just don't hear it, right? No, it's always no, no, no. You know what it is, of course. You know why we do that. You know why we're afraid most of the time. It's just our biology. It's part of the amygdala. It's part of our natural neurological design. Scientists know that. We know that. We say no because it comes more naturally. It's a defensive mechanism. We feel uncomfortable. We feel threatened because it's not the way I think. We feel threatened because I'm not familiar with this. I don't know who you are. I'm uncomfortable with something. So we say no. It's just natural. Saying yes is so much more difficult. They killed Jesus for it. That's the bottom line. What crucified Jesus was this inability to see God's love deeply and to receive it deeply. So we have this opportunity to participate in this same idea, loving in the world, saying yes to the world. But it's not easy. It takes intention. So I want to talk about intention because I know when I think of intention, I don't know about if you think of this, but when I think of intention, I think of sort of a destination, like a goal, right? Like a resolution almost, like I'm intending to accomplish something this year. Or I'm going to be intentional about making sure I get this done. But that's not really what intention means. If you go to the root word of intention, it actually means to stretch. You can see how the word got to where it is now. You can see how the word got to this idea that things are final. We have a finality, a final point, an end goal. But intention's not really about that. Intention is about stretching. Intention is about looking beyond, almost as if it's beyond our grasp. When we say the kingdom is come, we already know that we are participating in the kingdom, but it is not here fully. This is certainly not the kingdom of God. This is certainly not completely what the kingdom of God should or would look like. It's beyond our grasp, but we are intentional. We are stretching ourselves. This idea of looking beyond. I have had the great honor and privilege of having my granddaughter with us. Our oldest granddaughter with us from Germany, Molly. Her father, Tim, our oldest son, and daughter-in-law, Emily, have been with us for a couple of weeks. It's been amazing. Talk about having to learn how to say yes again, right? You remember when you were a parent? Some of you are parents. You've got small children. You know, will you do this with me? Will you do that with me? It's just a non-stop attention-seeking kind of thing. So every morning at 7 o'clock, like a rooster. I mean, it's just like clockwork. Here comes Molly into our bedroom, jumps in our bed. She's there every morning. And she looks at me and she says, Daddy. I mean, Granddad. She says, Daddo. She calls me Daddo. She says, Daddo. And I said, what? And she says, will you play with me? I'm like, it's 7 in the morning. So what am I going to go? You know, and of course you do what you do. You know, he's like, yeah, I'll play with you. I would love to play with you. I'm going to play with you in about 10 minutes. Let me wake up. And so then she's sitting there, you know, just banging on you and just kind of pestering you until you finally will give in and go and play. You know, and then throughout the whole day, it's that same thing. It's that, will you come and will you play with me? It's like a Zen master, I'm at a Zen monastery, you know, and the master keeps coming in and saying, are you paying attention? And then whacks you over the head. And it's just like that, because just when I think everything's quiet, my 5-year-old granddaughter comes in and says, will you play dolls with me? Or will you play, what's the one? Trolls. Trolls are huge, right? And so will you be Branch? And I'll be what's the other one? Poppy, thank you. Who said that? Thank you very much, yeah. Poppy, right? Will you be Poppy and I'll be Branch? And I'm looking at her going like, why would they name a guy after a tree? You know, part of a tree. And she's like, I don't get that, you know. So we play. And it's this constant reminder to be present to the moment. I have this thing that I wrote that I saw Joyce Carol Oates wrote, the poet. She said, we inhabit ourselves without valuing ourselves. Unable to see that here and now, this very moment is sacred. But then once it's gone, its value is suddenly incontestable, right? Right, so we look back and we think, oh, I wish I'd spent that kind of time. Or we look back even after we've said, you know, no, I really don't have time right now, and then they've gone off and you're going like, oh, now I really regret having to say that. You know, we have these moments of value. We inhabit our lives, but we inhabit them with sort of what Paul Tillich calls non-being. As opposed to being connected, we tend to live in disconnection. Even in our work, we find our work difficult to find any way of making it connect to something deeper, to some ground of being. That's the challenge of living intentionally, is to see that what we do has connection. How do we find that? How do we make that? How do we live into that? The angels opened up the heavens and they said, and God said, this is my child in whom I am well pleased. And I loved how Sharm said that and how DeAndrea both said that when they said, this is that affirmation, God incarnate in life to say, you are of worth. You are of supreme being. You are created in the image of divinity. And scientists remind us we are of the stars itself. We have this depth of being. So the second word I want you to take with you this morning is one of my favorite new words, quiddity. I like to say that word, quiddity. How many know what that word means? Not a clue. Yay, a new word for you. It sounds like a Harry Potter word, doesn't it? So so I'm listening to Molly, and Molly's going to figure into a couple of illustrations. You know, she's an easy target, right? She's there every day. So Molly is in Tim and Emily's room because she got up at 6:30 that morning. She knows, don't bother Oma and Daddo until at least 7 in the morning. So she goes to their room. Well, I was up early, and I was getting ready to make coffee, and I hear her go in to their room, and she's in bed, so I listen in. Sometimes I actually even record it, just so I have these conversations later on. So I listen in, and she says, Mommy, what makes me me? And Tim mumbles from under the covers, and he's saying, oh my God, this is too early for this. I haven't even had my organic free trade coffee yet. He says, Molly, I can't do that until I have my coffee. So she says, okay, and she gets up out of bed like she's going to go try to make coffee. And Emily says, no, Molly, come here. And then I hear what she says, beautiful explanation. She says, Molly, when Daddy's gone, where does Daddy hold you while he's gone to Germany and we're waiting here? Because he was going to leave. He left this last Thursday. And she said, she pulled the covers off of him, and then she tapped on his chest. And she said, in his heart. And then Emily said, And Molly, where do you hold us when we're not with you? And she smiled and pointed to her chest. And she said, Molly, that's what makes you who you are. It's what you hold in your heart. It's beautiful, maybe to a 60-year-old, 50-year-old, 30-year-old person. Molly says, I'm hungry. When are we going to have breakfast? Right? I mean, I think she gets it, but maybe she'll get it eventually. But what a beautiful idea. Quiddity means our essence. What do you hold in your heart? And by that, I mean, what stories? I don't know if I spelled essence right, but that's close. It's our essence. It's our substance. It's what connects us with others. Like monkeys have a certain quiddity. Certain monkeys do. Certain animals, certain flowers have a certain kind of quiddity. It's what connects them with other similar flowers. What we have, what our quiddity is, what we hold in our hearts. Now, another way to say that is what Isaac Dennison, the author, said when she said, everyone has a story to tell, and that story determines who we are. What stories do you hold in your heart about yourselves? Do your stories say, I'm of divinity. I'm of supreme value and supreme worth. I have a possibility of making a huge difference in the world as much as in my own life, as in the lives of those I'm with. Does your story say that? Does your story say, nah, I'm not quite there. I can't quite do it. I'm not quite what I wanted to be. My life didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted it to turn out. I've made a lot of mistakes. My story got stuck there. Is that what your story says? I told Tamara that I wasn't going to mention this, but I'm going to go ahead and quickly mention this. I went and saw this movie. You know how I'm always talking about movies that we go see and maybe recommending movies and stuff? And so I went and saw them there. Linda and I went and saw a movie at the Modern. We went and saw that new Woody Allen movie, Wonder Wheel. Any of you seen it yet? No? Yeah? Maybe you'll agree with me. Don't go see it. But here's the interesting thing about it, because spoiler alert, it was basically a whole hour and a half of people who lived in the lie. They basically lived in the mask of lies that never acknowledged who they really were and never acknowledged what they were capable of doing. And so they lived their lives out in utter tragic sort of misery, sort of never being able to launch and sort of cycling back into this tragic kind of lifestyle. Kind of what we often envision about Woody Allen, right? I mean, it's kind of like his own story in a sense. And it was that sort of extreme, tragic, existentialist idea from the 50s. So it's an interesting story, but one of the quotes in the middle of that story is the one that I want to leave you with. It's also an interesting quote, and it was this. It said, the writer in the story, who's a lifeguard going to grad school, tells one of the women in the story that he's kind of having an affair with, whose husband runs the merry-go-round at Coney Island. Already you're seeing how depressing this is getting. And he says, in the middle of a Chinese garden where it's very beautiful, he looks at the main female character, and he says, O'Neill plays are all about the human condition, how we have to lie to ourselves in order to live. How we have to lie to ourselves in order to live. It's such a profound thing, this idea of saying yes. How do we do it? One of the things that yeah, did you get some water? Yeah. Okay, all right. One of the things that I want you to think about as we think about this idea of how we say yes to life is this willingness to affirm. To simply affirm rather than negate. It's the most challenging thing, I think, for us to try to do, and yet it's one of the things that I think we can be rewarded with most easily. The problem is you've got to do it for the right reason, right? So I heard this story, and it's a fun story. I'm going to leave it with you with a couple of thoughts. I used to work in a rural church years ago in Ovilla, and I heard this story, and a phone call came into a church, and it was a county seat church. Fellow was a farmer on the other end of the phone. The receptionist answered, hello, this is First Church, such and such. And he said, listen, I'm just trying to reach the big pig at the trough. and the receptionist said, excuse me, what? And he said again, I said, I'm just trying to speak to the big pig at the trough. She said, sir, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, look, Look, I'm just trying to speak. Do you have a senior pastor? I mean, I work on a farm. I think of everything in terms of farm and livestock and animals. I just want to speak to the big wig, the big pig at the trough. And she said, sir, we do not refer to our senior pastor as a big pig. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. He said, I didn't mean to offend anybody. He said, I'm really sorry. That's just what I do. It's who I am. I just was speaking that way. I just wonder, I could talk to anybody. I just have a gift of about $100,000 I'd like to give to the church. Who do I speak to? And then there was a long silence, and then the woman on the other side said, just a minute, the big pig just came in. All right, cheap preacher tale, right? Cheap preacher story. But here's the point. What motivates you to say yes? Can you say yes in spite of? That's the challenge of saying yes to life. There's lots of reasons to be motivated to say yes. There's lots of reasons to change our story up. But can you change it up because deep down you believe it? Deep down you resonate with it? What we're going to talk about over the next few weeks are practices that help us get to this place of resonating with what is holy, what is sacred in the midst of life, of connecting with God as we connect with one another. Thanks very much. And as we learn to say yes together.